The strategic drive chain is a wonderful tool to help us understand the whole strategic process. It's a very simple analogy. Imagine a set of 8 wheels going around an axle, a drive chain in engineering terms. Now the accelerator pedal sits on the left-hand side as we look at this drive chain. A world changes, whether it be changing global political leadership, the rise of the East as a center of economic power, the BRIC nations, emerging nations, all beginning to play far more in the world. A more multipolar world in economic senses. The rise of technology, global warming, environmental factors. All of these are global issues. A second factor that changes is the country that we operate in. Each country has its own idiosyncrasies, and each country is in a different state of development. Changes are happening within that country, whether they be socio-political, socio-economic, urbanization, de-urbanization, changes of ruling parties, new political agendas. All of these are unique to different countries, and each country has its own idiosyncrasies as it faces its life cycle, its stage of development, and what it needs to do to both protect and stimulate its economy. And thirdly, the market that we operate in also changes. These are driven by new global competitors, changes to the value chain, new customers with different desires, different wants, mergers, acquisitions, changing the balance of power in the value chain, new products, new services, different ways of capturing the hearts and minds of our clients and consumers. All of these are dynamics. We also find in many markets increased regulation. These three, the changing world, changing country, and changing markets, are all part of what we need to understand, because they're creating a new strategic context the whole time as they move, as they work jointly or independently of each other. Cool. And so to the fourth wheel. And that wheel is our strategy. And it should be changing strategy. If you strategize into where your markets are today, as I've expressed before, this is suboptimal. Those markets are moving. And what is critical for us to understand is where the dynamic of a changing world, changing country you're operating in, and changing market is going to. We need to strategize for where our markets are going to be 2 to 3 to 4 years from now, depending on the industry that you're in. So the strategist's challenge is to understand the trends, the drivers, and what context it's creating, and how to create a strategy for where markets are going to. Having said that the formulation side of strategy is the easy side, what's the difficult part? Well, implementation is really what is difficult. Now, the start-off point of implementation, or the right-hand side of the drive chain, where the brake pedal sits, if you like, is stakeholder, or what we should more technically call stakeholder alignment. Are their expectations of what they are looking for from you aligned? Are shareholders' expectations aligned with trade union, with the employees, with regulators, with clients, with customers, with suppliers? And that's the role we need to understand. What are all these organizations, all those who have an interest, whether it be financial or purely time or emotional or energy-wise, what are they expecting from our organization? Those stakeholders, in turn, exert an influence on the leadership of the organization. Now, the leadership is not just people with fancy titles. Yes, shareholders might put in place directors. Trade unions might put in place shop stewards. Governments might put in place regulators. But leadership, as we know, is the ability to influence others. And in its simplest form, anyone in the organization who is in a position or a disposition to want to influence others positively or negatively is exerting leadership on the organization. That leadership, in turn, creates capabilities, organizational capabilities, this third wheel from the right. And this is a critical thing, because the capabilities represent what the organization is now capable of delivering. So the capabilities typically would be systems, processes, structures, capital, technology, skills, culture, climate. It's the wherewithal that an organization has. Those capabilities are mission critical, because Those capabilities will determine what operational tactics you can employ. And secondly, those capabilities will determine what strategy you implement. The harsh reality is the only strategy that you are going to implement is what you're capable of. It doesn't matter what you've dreamed up or where you want to go or what your market is demanding. Your strategic implementation and your operational tactics is completely a factor of your organization capabilities. And your organization capabilities are completely a factor of the leadership or lack of leadership that your organization has. And that leadership is determined by the degree of alignment and commitment, support, and buy-in of the stakeholder base. Now, as we've noted before, the key thing about capabilities is they need to keep pace with the pace of change outside the organization in your changing market. So capabilities have to really keep moving, but that is totally dependent on the leadership or the lack of leadership. If there's a stoppage among stakeholders, if one of the stakeholders has got its foot on the brake, shareholders don't want to invest in the right kind of capital, trade unions negotiating unrealistic expectations, government regulators out of touch with the market, for example, the leadership is held back, the organization capabilities go static. If they are static and on the left-hand side, the market is moving, what do we do to our drive chain? Well, the answer is we snap the axle or shear the axle, if you like. And the shearing happens between the changing market and our strategy. It doesn't matter what we strategized, what's implemented is contingent on the capabilities we have. And if those are static, our strategy is static. Does anything stay constant, you might ask? Apart from change itself, of course. And the answer is yes. I believe there are two fundamental things that do or should remain constant. And it's depicted by the axle. I mean, what would happen to these wheels if there wasn't a rigid, strong, firm axle? If the axle was floppy, for example, the wheels could end up going around in opposite directions. Or if the axle was non-existent, those wheels would simply spin off on their own trajectory. The axle represents the organization ethos, and that, to my thinking, is depicted by 2 points. It's the purpose of the organization. For example, why does this organization exist? And understanding that purpose is actually about what this organization is giving to the markets it operates in. The purpose is depicted by why the market is the richer for this organization operating in whatever environment it is. It's about what you give. Secondly, it's about values. Values shape who we are, how we're going to behave. So the why we're going to exist and how we're going to behave are timeless elements. These do not change over years. What we want to achieve in the market, how we've got to operate as an organization might change, but the ethos of who we are, what we stand for, and how we're going to behave should not change. These are timeless.